Commander Zethkari sat in the cold metal chair and tried to keep his forearms from shaking. The interview room on Haven 7 station felt too small for his large frame. His gray skin showed old battle scars and his yellow eyes kept looking at the door like he wanted to run away. Dr. Elena Martinez sat across from him with her recording device between them on the plane table. Elena had interviewed many alien soldiers before, but none like Zethkari. The Vorthak warrior had contacted her 3 months ago asking to tell his story about the war with humans. Most aliens refused to talk about those battles. Some said it was too shameful. Others said humans were too scary to remember. Zethkari was different. He said the galaxy needed to know what really happened during those dark years. The research station Haven 7 was neutral ground where all species could meet safely. It orbited a dead planet that nobody wanted. The walls were white and clean, but the air recyclers made soft humming sounds that reminded everyone they were in space. Elena adjusted her recording device and looked at her notes. She had spent weeks preparing questions about the human galactic war that ended 15 years ago. Zethkari wore his old military uniform but without the medals or rank symbols. The dark blue fabric stretched tight across his broad chest. His people, the Vorthak, stood almost 8 feet tall with thick muscles and bone ridges on their foreheads. They had ruled dozens of worlds before humans ever left their home planet. Everyone in the galaxy knew Vorthak soldiers never retreated from battle and never showed mercy to enemies. Elena started with easy questions. She asked about Zethkari's homeworld and his family. He came from a military clan that had served the galactic hegemony for over 200 years. His grandfather fought in the Zephyrian Wars. His father conquered the Crystal Nebula systems. Military service was not just a job for the Vorthak people. It was their way of life and their greatest honor. The hegemony controlled most of the galaxy through a simple system. When they found a new species, they would send warships to demonstrate superior technology. Most aliens would surrender quickly and join the alliance as junior members. Those who refused would face total war until they had no choice but to submit. The system worked for thousands of years across hundreds of worlds. Zethkari had served in 17 different conquest campaigns before the humans were discovered. He joined the elite Crimson Talon division when he was barely an adult. His first battle was against the insect-like Chiton Confederation. The enemy had superior numbers, but inferior weapons. The war lasted only 6 months before complete hegemony victory. Zethkari earned his first combat medal during the siege of their capital Hive. Elena noticed how Zethkari's voice stayed steady when he talked about old victories. His yellow eyes would light up as he described successful tactics and glorious battles. But whenever she mentioned humans, his whole body would tense up. His mandibles would click together in what she recognized as a Vorthak stress response. His forearms would move restlessly like he was looking for weapons that were not there. The discovery of humans happened almost by accident. A hegemony survey ship was mapping the outer spiral arm when they detected radio signals from a small yellow star. The signals were primitive by galactic standards but showed clear signs of intelligent life. The survey team reported finding a species that had not yet achieved faster than light travel. They were confined to one star system with only basic fusion technology. Intelligence reports about humans were not impressive. They had a single homeworld with several billion inhabitants. Their space presence was limited to a few mining stations and small colonies on nearby planets. They showed typical signs of a young civilization with multiple competing governments and frequent conflicts among themselves. The analysis team predicted that human resistance would collapse within days of first contact. Zethkari remembered reading those reports in the briefing room of the warship Domination's Edge. The other Vorthak officers had laughed about how easy this conquest would be. Some joked that they might finish the campaign in time for the harvest festivals back home. Nobody expected humans to provide any real challenge to the mighty hegemony forces. The battle plan was standard for primitive species contact. A small fleet would enter the human system and demonstrate superior firepower by destroying a few military installations. Human leaders would be given the choice to surrender or face complete destruction of their civilization. Most species chose surrender when they realized how outmatched they were. The hegemony preferred willing subjects to radioactive ruins. Elena asked about Zethkari's feelings before the first battle. The old warrior's expression changed, and his voice grew quieter. He said that something felt different about this campaign from the very beginning. The other officers were excited about an easy victory, But Zethkari found himself checking his weapons more carefully than usual. He could not explain why, but the approaching battle made him nervous in ways he had never experienced before. Tirsti. Human solar system looked peaceful when the hegemony fleet arrived. There were no massive defense platforms or hidden weapon systems. Human spacecraft were small and moved slowly compared to alien technology. Their largest military vessels were barely the size of hegemony escort ships. Everything the intelligence reports had said appeared to be true. Humans seemed like primitive beings who would surrender quickly when faced with superior force. Zethkari's voice began to shake slightly as he described those first moments in human space. The fleet commander had ordered standard intimidation protocols. Warning messages were broadcast in human languages demanding immediate surrender. Human military forces were given 12 hours to respond before the demonstration bombardment would begin. It should have been simple and quick like all the other conquests. But Elena could see in Zethkari's yellow eyes that something had gone terribly wrong. His forearms were trembling now despite his efforts to control them. Sweat beaded on his gray forehead as he stared at the table between them. The proud warrior who had conquered 17 worlds was struggling to continue his story. Whatever happened next had changed him forever in ways that still caused him pain 15 years later. Zethkari's mandibles clicked rapidly as he tried to find words for what happened at Luna Station. Elena could see the old warrior's yellow eyes growing distant like he was seeing those events again. His forearms pressed against the table edge hard enough to leave marks in the metal. The memories were clearly painful, but he forced himself to continue speaking. The human response to hegemony surrender demands was not what anyone expected. Instead of frightened messages begging for mercy, the aliens received a single transmission from Luna Station. A human male identifying himself as Captain Jake Morrison had sent a brief reply. His words were simple and direct. He said humans did not surrender to invaders, and the hegemony fleet could go back where it came from. Most alien species would have followed such defiance with desperate attempts at negotiation. They would offer tribute or special agreements to avoid destruction. Humans did something completely different. Morrison's mining vessel Defiance detached from Luna Station and began moving directly toward the hegemony flagship. The alien commanders assumed it was carrying a delegation to discuss terms of surrender. Zethkari was stationed aboard the escort ship Crimson Fang when the human vessel approached. He watched the tactical displays showing the small mining ship moving steadily toward the massive hegemony dreadnought Stellar Dominance. The human ship was less than 1/10 the size of the alien flagship. It looked like a metal insect flying toward a giant predator. Fleet Admiral Karethvan ordered standard boarding protocols. The human ship would be captured intact and its crew interrogated about Earth's defenses. Tractor beams locked onto the mining vessel and began pulling it toward the docking bay. Everything proceeded according to normal first contact procedures. The aliens expected to find terrified humans ready to cooperate with their new masters. Captain Morrison's crew consisted of 30 miners and transport workers. They were not soldiers and had no military training. Their ship carried basic mining equipment and a few small defensive weapons meant for asteroid clearing. Against hegemony technology, they had no chance of victory in conventional battle. Any reasonable species would have surrendered immediately when faced with such overwhelming odds. The first sign something was wrong came when human communications increased dramatically. Instead of surrender negotiations, Morrison's crew began broadcasting on multiple frequencies. They sent detailed scans of hegemony ships back toward Earth. Technical specifications and tactical data flowed in constant streams toward human military installations. Zethkari remembered feeling confused by this behavior. Sharing intelligence about superior enemy forces served no logical purpose if surrender was inevitable. Most species tried to hide their knowledge, hoping to gain better treatment from conquerors. Humans seemed determined to tell their homeworld everything about alien technology, even though resistance appeared hopeless. The human transmissions continued even as tractor beams pulled their ship closer to the hegemony flagship. Morrison's voice came over open channels describing alien weapons and armor configurations. His crew took detailed recordings of everything they could see. They acted like they were conducting scientific research rather than facing capture by hostile forces. Elena noticed Zethkari's breathing becoming irregular as he described the next part. The old warrior's gray skin had turned slightly green around the edges. His forearms moved restlessly like he was trying to escape invisible restraints. Whatever happened at Luna Station had traumatized him in ways that still affected him after 15 years. When the human mining ship reached the docking bay of Stellar Dominance, something unprecedented occurred. Instead of shutting down engines and preparing for boarding, Morrison activated his ship's fusion reactor overload sequence. The Defiance had been converted into a massive bomb during its approach to the alien vessel. 30 humans had willingly turned themselves into a weapon. The explosion tore through the Hegemony flagship's main hull and destroyed its primary weapon systems. Stellar Dominance was built to withstand attacks from other warships, not internal detonations from captured vessels. The blast killed over 3,000 alien crew members, including Fleet Admiral Karethvan. Morrison and his entire crew died instantly in the fusion fire. Zethkari's voice broke as he described watching the flagship burn. Debris from both vessels scattered across space in a glowing cloud of twisted metal and plasma. The pride of the Hegemony fleet had been destroyed by a converted mining ship crewed by untrained humans. No alien species had ever chosen mutual destruction over capture and interrogation. The most disturbing part came in the final moments before the explosion. Human communications had continued right up until the fusion overload activated. Morrison's crew was singing something they called Amazing Grace as their ship approached the alien docking bay. Their voices remained calm and steady even though they knew death was only minutes away. Zethkari had never heard music like that before. The human voices blended together in harmonies that seemed to express both sadness and hope at the same time. They sang about being lost and then found about dangers past and grace that saved them. The song continued until the moment of explosion, when all voices fell silent forever. The psychological impact on Hegemony forces was immediate and severe. Every alien officer had been trained to expect surrender or desperate flight from primitive species. Suicide attacks were known but only as last resort actions by cornered enemies. Humans had chosen death over capture as their opening move in the war. Military analysts struggled to understand Morrison's tactics. The destruction of one flagship would not stop the Hegemony invasion. 30 human lives had been traded for 3,000 alien deaths, but Earth still faced overwhelming enemy forces. By conventional military thinking, the human action made no sense and accomplished nothing important. But Zethkari knew something had changed in that moment. The casual confidence that had carried Hegemony forces through hundreds of conquests was gone. Officers began checking their defensive systems more carefully. Boarding parties requested additional security measures. The humans had introduced an element of unpredictability that made every subsequent encounter potentially dangerous. The intelligence data transmitted by Morrison's crew proved equally valuable to human forces. Within hours of the Luna Station battle, Earth's defensive systems began adapting to counter Hegemony technology. Human engineers reverse-engineered alien weapon signatures and developed countermeasures with frightening speed. They treated the tactical information like a gift rather than stolen intelligence. Elena asked how the loss of Stellar Dominance affected fleet morale. Zethkari closed his yellow eyes and was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. He said that experienced Vorthak warriors began requesting transfers to other campaigns. Nobody wanted to fight an enemy that preferred death to defeat. The humans had shown they would pay any price to resist conquest. The remaining Hegemony commanders decided to proceed with the invasion despite their losses. They convinced themselves that Morrison's action was an aberration caused by primitive human psychology. Surely the leaders on Earth would be more reasonable when faced with the complete destruction of their species. The war plans continued unchanged, but everyone knew the easy victory they had expected was no longer possible. Zethkari opened his eyes and looked directly at Elena for the first time since beginning his story. His expression showed pain and something else she could not identify. Fear perhaps, or maybe respect for an enemy that had died 15 years ago. The old warrior's forearms had stopped shaking, but his voice remained unsteady as he prepared to continue his account of humanity's impossible war. The siege of Mars Colony lasted 6 months and broke something fundamental in Zethkari's understanding of warfare. He sat forward in his chair as painful memories flooded back. His yellow eyes stared at nothing while his mind returned to the red planet where everything he believed about military strategy proved worthless against human determination. General Lisa Parker commanded the Mars Colony Defense Forces with only 12,000 troops against a Hegemony invasion fleet of 50 ships. Any competent military analysis showed the battle was hopeless before it began. Human defensive positions could not withstand orbital bombardment from alien weapons. The logical choice was immediate evacuation to preserve lives for future resistance efforts. Parker made a different decision that stunned hegemony commanders. Instead of protecting Mars colony's infrastructure, her forces began systematically destroying everything of value. Mining equipment was sabotaged beyond repair. Atmospheric processors were blown up by their own operators. Food production facilities were burned to prevent alien forces from using them as supply bases. Zethkari had never seen defenders destroy their own positions before the enemy even landed. Most species would fight to preserve their homes and communities. Humans seemed willing to turn Mars into a worthless rock rather than let invaders benefit from capturing it. Parker's strategy made no sense according to conventional military doctrine. The hegemony plan was to capture Mars colony intact and use it as a staging area for the assault on Earth. The planet's strategic location and existing infrastructure would provide perfect support for the main invasion force. Human cooperation was expected once they realized resistance was futile. Instead, the aliens found themselves fighting for control of burning ruins. Elena noticed Zethkari's forearms beginning to tremble again as he described the first ground assault. Hegemony Marines landed expecting to face desperate defenders protecting their last strongholds. What they found was a maze of booby traps and ambush positions in the tunnels beneath Mars colony. Humans had spent weeks turning their own home into a death trap. The tunnel system beneath Mars colony was designed for protection against radiation and meteor impacts. Miles of interconnected passages linked every major facility on the planet. Human engineers knew every maintenance shaft and emergency exit. They used this knowledge to create the most effective guerrilla warfare environment possible. Sergeant Danny Walsh led the tunnel, fighting with a mixed unit of miners and security guards. His people had lived and worked in those passages for years. They could navigate in complete darkness while hegemony forces stumbled around with artificial lighting. The aliens' superior technology meant nothing in narrow spaces filled with human-made chemical irritants. Zethkari's voice became strained as he recalled his unit's first encounter with Walsh's fighters. The Vortex soldiers were equipped with the finest weapons and armor in the galaxy. Their enhanced senses could track enemies across vast distances under normal conditions. But the tunnels beneath Mars colony were not normal conditions. Human defenders had released clouds of industrial solvents and cleaning chemicals into the tunnel ventilation systems. The mixture created a fog that burned alien eyes and overwhelmed their sensitive smell receptors. Hegemony soldiers found their natural advantages turned into painful weaknesses. They could barely see or breathe while humans wearing simple breathing masks moved freely through their own trap. The fighting in the tunnels lasted for weeks with no clear victor. Hegemony forces controlled the surface installations, but could not eliminate human resistance underground. Every advance cost alien lives, while defenders seemed to replace their losses effortlessly. Walsh's people knew exactly where to strike and when to retreat through passages too narrow for larger alien soldiers to follow. Elena asked about civilian casualties during the siege. Zethkari's expression darkened as he described finding the colony's medical center. Most alien species would evacuate non-combatants to safety before major battles began. Humans had done something different that haunted him even now after 15 years. Dr. Amy Chen had volunteered to remain at the Mars Colony Hospital with a skeleton crew of nurses and technicians. Her job was treating wounded defenders who could not be evacuated through the tunnel systems. The medical facility was clearly marked according to galactic conventions and should have been protected from military action by both sides. When hegemony forces finally breached the hospital's defenses, they expected to find frightened civilians ready to surrender. Instead, they discovered Dr. Chen still performing surgery on a wounded human soldier. The operating room was lit only by emergency power cells and backup generators. She worked by the dim glow of portable medical scanners, while explosions shook the building around her. Zethkari had been part of the assault team that secured the medical facility. He watched through the observation window as Dr. Chen finished closing surgical incisions on her patient. Her hands remained perfectly steady despite the chaos surrounding her. When alien soldiers entered the operating room, she calmly injected her patient with pain medication before looking up at her captors. The human doctor made no attempt to flee or negotiate for her safety. She asked only that her patients be allowed to die without additional suffering. Dr. Chen had stayed behind, knowing the facility would be overrun. Her final act was ensuring wounded defenders received proper medical care even as enemy forces closed in around her. Most alien medics would have evacuated with other non-combatants when battle became inevitable. The idea of remaining to treat hopeless cases made no logical sense from a resource management perspective. Dr. Chen's sacrifice provided no military advantage and saved lives that would be lost anyway when the colony fell to superior forces. But Zethkari understood that something greater than military logic was operating in human behavior. Dr. Chen had not stayed because of orders or strategic necessity. She remained because her personal code of ethics demanded that wounded people receive medical care, regardless of circumstances. Her commitment transcended rational calculation about survival odds or military effectiveness. The discovery of the medical facility marked a turning point in Zethkari's perception of human nature. He had spent 30 years fighting wars of conquest across the galaxy. Never before had he encountered enemy forces that prioritized care for wounded over preservation of their own lives. The concept challenged everything he believed about intelligent species and survival instincts. Similar encounters occurred throughout the Mars colony siege. Human defenders would risk their lives to recover wounded comrades from dangerous positions. Medical personnel continued treating patients even when evacuation was impossible. Supply teams delivered food and ammunition to isolated units knowing they would probably not survive the mission. Elena observed that Zethkari's hands were shaking more violently as he described these incidents. The old warrior seemed to be reliving experiences that had fundamentally changed his worldview. His voice cracked with emotion as he struggled to explain behaviors that his military training had never prepared him to understand. The siege of Mars colony ended when General Parker ordered the complete destruction of the planet's atmospheric processing system. The explosion created a toxic environment that made continued habitation impossible for both humans and aliens. Parker and her remaining forces died in the blast while denying hegemony forces any benefit from their conquest. Zethkari stopped speaking and buried his face in his 4 hands. Elena could see his shoulders shaking as suppressed emotions finally broke through his military discipline. The proud Vorthak warrior, who had conquered 17 worlds, was crying for enemies who had died 15 years ago, on a planet he had helped destroy. When he finally looked up, his yellow eyes were filled with tears that Elena had never seen from any alien species before. Zethkari's voice was barely audible as he said the words that had haunted him since Mars' colony fell. No hegemony species had ever shown such dedication to their wounded and dying. The humans fought like they had something worth more than life itself to protect. The Earth invasion should have ended human resistance within hours according to every military projection. Zethkari's voice became hollow as he described the massive orbital bombardment that preceded ground operations. Hegemony battleships fired continuously for 3 days, targeting every major city and military installation. The planet's surface burned under alien weapons that could crack continental plates. Dr. Elena Martinez watched the old warrior struggle with memories that clearly caused him physical pain. His gray skin had developed a sickly pallor, and his 4 arms moved restlessly like he was fighting invisible enemies. The trauma from Earth's surface was written across his entire body in ways that 15 years had not healed. When the bombardment ended, satellite imagery showed a world transformed into smoking ruins. Every human government center had been obliterated. Military bases existed only as radioactive craters. Major cities were reduced to rubble and ash. By all logical analysis, organized human resistance should have collapsed completely. The surviving population would surrender rather than face total extinction. Zethkari had expected to find broken refugees begging for mercy when his unit landed near the ruins of Mexico City. Instead, they encountered Lieutenant Colonel Ben Rodriguez leading a coordinated defense network built from urban debris. Human survivors had emerged from underground shelters and immediately began fighting with weapons salvaged from destroyed military installations. The sight that greeted hegemony ground forces defied every principle of post-bombardment operations. Humans were not cowering in hiding places waiting for rescue that would never come. They had organized themselves into effective combat units using makeshift equipment and improvised tactics. Rodriguez commanded over 5,000 fighters who treated the alien invasion as a problem to be solved rather than a catastrophe to survive. Elena noticed Zethkari's breathing becoming irregular as he described the urban warfare that followed. His yellow eyes darted around the room like he expected human ambushes to materialize from empty corners. The old soldier was experiencing flashbacks to battles that had traumatized him beyond normal military stress reactions. Rodriguez had turned the ruins of Mexico City into what humans called the concrete labyrinth. Every pile of rubble concealed sniper positions and booby traps. Destroyed buildings became fortress networks connected by tunnels dug through basement foundations. Streets were blocked with carefully positioned debris that channeled alien forces into predetermined kill zones. The human defenders used captured hegemony weapons with frightening effectiveness. They had studied alien technology during the orbital bombardment and quickly learned to operate enemy equipment. Rodriguez's people modified alien weapons to fire human ammunition and adapted energy cells to power improvised devices. Their technical adaptability was unlike anything Zethkari had encountered before. Hegemony forces found themselves trapped in an urban maze designed by enemies who knew every hiding place and escape route. Human snipers would fire a few shots and then disappear through holes in walls before alien soldiers could respond. Booby traps made from repurposed alien electronics killed entire squads without warning. The concrete ruins became a living entity that fought against the invaders. Zethkari's unit was pinned down in the labyrinth for 3 weeks, facing constant harassment and psychological warfare. Humans would play recordings of Earth music over captured communication systems. They broadcast messages describing alien casualties and tactical failures. The psychological pressure was designed to break enemy morale rather than simply kill opposing forces. The most disturbing aspect was how human civilians participated in the resistance effort. Children and elderly people served as messengers carrying information between fighter units. Women organized supply networks that kept defenders equipped despite impossible logistics. Everyone from doctors to teachers contributed to the war effort, with no apparent fear of alien retaliation. Elena asked about civilian scientist Dr. Helen Kim, whose broadcasts had become legendary throughout the galaxy. Zethkari's expression grew, even more pained as he recalled the woman whose voice had haunted hegemony communication channels for months during the Earth campaign. Her story represented everything that confused and terrified alien forces about human nature. Dr. Kim was a university physics professor who had survived the bombing of her research facility. Instead of fleeing to safety, she began broadcasting instructions for building electromagnetic pulse devices from common household electronics. Her transmissions reached human populations worldwide and provided technical knowledge that dramatically increased resistance effectiveness against alien technology. The broadcasts continued even as hegemony forces closed in on Dr. Kim's position. Her voice remained calm and professional, while explaining complex engineering concepts in simple terms that untrained humans could understand. She treated the alien invasion like a technical problem that could be solved through education and shared knowledge rather than military force alone. Zethkari's voice cracked as he described the final transmission from Dr. Kim's location. Hegemony assault teams had surrounded the building where she was broadcasting. The woman knew she had only minutes before capture or death. Her last message contained complete technical specifications for several weapons systems, followed by a personal note to her daughter. The personal message revealed that Dr. Kim had a family that she would never see again. She told her daughter to remember that monsters could be beaten by people who refused to give up hope. Her voice remained steady and loving, even though she faced certain death. The transmission ended abruptly when hegemony soldiers breached her position. What haunted Zethkari most about Dr. Kim's story was the realization that she had chosen to help strangers rather than save herself. Her broadcasts aided human defenders she would never meet in places she would never visit. The concept of sacrificing personal safety for the benefit of unknown people challenged every assumption about intelligent behavior and survival instincts. Similar stories emerged from human resistance cells worldwide. Scientists shared research, data freely rather than protecting intellectual property. Engineers taught manufacturing techniques to anyone who asked. Medical professionals treated wounded fighters regardless of their ability to pay or their chances of survival. The entire human species seemed to operate according to principles that made no sense from an individual survival perspective. Elena observed that Zethkari was now crying openly as he described encounters with human children during the urban fighting. His forearms shook uncontrollably, and his voice broke repeatedly. The memories of young humans in combat clearly traumatized him more than any other aspect of the war. Teenagers like Kevin Murphy and Maria Santos fought alongside adult defenders with weapons almost too large for them to carry. They showed no fear of Vorthak soldiers who stood twice their height and possessed natural advantages in strength and sensory perception. The young humans treated alien opponents like dangerous animals that needed to be driven away, rather than superior beings deserving respect or submission. The children soldiers displayed tactical intelligence that rivaled experienced hegemony officers. They knew when to attack and when to retreat. They could coordinate complex ambushes using hand signals and crude communication devices. Most disturbing of all, they treated captured alien prisoners with surprising kindness while remaining absolutely determined to continue fighting. Zethkari recalled finding a hegemony soldier who had been captured by Murphy's unit after being wounded in an explosion. The young humans had provided medical treatment and food while keeping their prisoner secured. They asked questions about alien technology and culture with genuine curiosity rather than interrogation techniques. Their behavior suggested they viewed the war as a temporary problem rather than permanent hatred. The psychological impact of fighting child soldiers broke many hegemony. Veterans who had survived decades of military campaigns. Adult enemies could be understood and respected according to traditional warrior codes. But human children who fought like seasoned professionals while maintaining innocent curiosity about their opponents challenged fundamental beliefs about the nature of warfare and civilization. Elena noted that Zethkari had stopped speaking and was staring at his hands with an expression of profound guilt. The old warrior seemed lost in memories that continued to cause him pain after 15 years. His entire body trembled as if he was still fighting battles that had ended long ago on a planet far away. When he finally looked up at Elena, his yellow eyes were filled with a mixture of trauma and something else she could not identify. Respect. Perhaps her admiration for enemies who had taught him lessons about courage and determination that no military academy had ever attempted to explain. The proud Vorthak soldier was preparing to reveal the most devastating truth of all. Zethkari's breakdown was complete now, and tears flowed freely down his gray cheeks as he prepared to share the truth that had destroyed his faith in everything he once believed. Dr. Elena Martinez leaned forward, knowing she was about to hear the secret that had haunted this proud warrior for 15 years. His forearms pressed against the table as if he needed physical support to continue speaking. The revelation came during the final battle for Earth's capital when hegemony forces captured a human military database from the ruins of their central command facility. Zethkari's intelligence unit was tasked with analyzing the recovered data to understand human command structures and strategic planning. What they discovered shattered every assumption about how the war had been conducted. The database contained no evidence of centralized military leadership after the first week of the invasion. No supreme commander was coordinating global resistance efforts. No master strategy existed for defending Earth against superior alien forces. Every human colony, every ship, every soldier had been fighting independently with no higher authority, directing their actions. Zethkari's voice became a whisper as he described reading through the recovered files. Battle reports from around the world showed the same pattern everywhere. Local commanders made their own decisions about tactics and objectives. Civilian leaders organized resistance cells without consulting distant authorities. Scientists shared research freely with anyone who requested information. The humans were not following orders from military headquarters because no functional headquarters existed after the orbital bombardment. They were fighting for something that transcended command structures and strategic doctrines. Every individual human had made a personal choice to resist alien occupation, regardless of the cost to themselves or their chances of survival. Elena felt her own understanding of the war changing as Zethkari explained what the database revealed about human motivation. The aliens had assumed they were fighting a conventional military campaign against an organized enemy government. Instead, they were battling an entire species that had collectively decided death was preferable to foreign rule. Commander Rick Taylor's final transmission from the space elevator defense platform became symbolic of humanity's approach to the war. His position was surrounded, and his weapons were nearly exhausted. Relief forces would never arrive in time to prevent the facility's capture. Any reasonable military officer would have surrendered to preserve his troops' lives for future battles. Taylor's last message contained no tactical intelligence or strategic updates. He did not request reinforcements or report enemy positions. His transmission was 3 words that captured the essence of human resistance. He said we choose how this ends. The space elevator exploded seconds later, taking Taylor's entire unit, along with the attacking alien forces. Zethkari explained how this realization spread through hegemony forces like a psychological plague. Officers who had conquered hundreds of worlds suddenly understood they were facing something unprecedented in galactic history. No species had ever chosen extinction over subjugation. The concept challenged fundamental assumptions about intelligent behavior and survival instincts. The war was not about territory or resources or political control. Humans were fighting for an abstract concept they called freedom. They valued this idea more than their own lives, and more than the continued existence of their species. The willingness to die for principles rather than practical goals was incomprehensible to alien minds shaped by millions of years of evolutionary survival pressure. Elena asked how individual hegemony soldiers reacted to this discovery. Zethkari closed his yellow eyes and described the psychological collapse that followed. Veterans who had served for decades began requesting transfers to other campaigns. Some resigned their commissions, rather than continue fighting an enemy that preferred death to defeat. The Vorthak warrior code emphasized honor in battle and respect for worthy opponents, but humans had redefined what it meant to be worthy of respect. They fought not for personal glory or military advantage, but for ideals that existed only in their collective imagination. Their courage came from beliefs rather than training or superior equipment. Zethkari's own crisis of faith began when he realized that humans were braver than any Vorthak warrior he had ever known. His people prided themselves on fearlessness in battle and loyalty unto death. But human civilians showed greater courage than elite alien soldiers. Children displayed more determination than experienced military officers. The psychological impact devastated hegemony morale at every level. Soldiers began questioning orders and requesting explanations for tactical decisions. Officers struggled with depression and anxiety disorders. Some units simply refused to engage human forces, preferring court-martial to continued participation in battles they could not understand. Dr. Martinez observed that Zethkari seemed calmer now that he had shared the central truth about the war. His forearms had stopped shaking and his breathing was more regular. The terrible secret was finally outside his mind, where someone else could help him carry the burden of knowledge. The war ended not through human military victory, but through hegemony withdrawal from Earth's solar system. No alien species could psychologically tolerate fighting enemies that viewed death as preferable to conquest. The very concept threatened core beliefs about survival and civilization that held galactic society together. Within months of the database discovery, hegemony, forces began evacuating Earth despite maintaining overwhelming technological superiority. The alien fleet could have reduced the planet to radioactive dust, but doing so would have proven human victory rather than alien conquest. Dead humans who chose their own fate were more dangerous than living subjects who might eventually accept foreign rule. Elena asked about the immediate aftermath of withdrawal. Zethkari described the confused silence that followed, as both sides tried to understand what had happened. Humans had not defeated the hegemony through superior tactics or advanced weapons. They had simply demonstrated that some things were more important than survival itself. The galactic community's response was unprecedented in recorded history. Humanity was offered immediate membership in the alliance as equals rather than conquered subjects. No species had ever been granted such status after armed conflict with hegemony forces. The invitation recognized that humans possessed qualities that made them unsuitable for traditional conquest and subjugation. Zethkari resigned his commission immediately after returning from the Earth campaign. He could not continue serving a military that had been psychologically defeated by primitives who refused to accept defeat. The proud warrior who had conquered 17 worlds was broken by humans who conquered nothing but chose everything. His new career as a xenopsychologist focused on studying human concepts of freedom and individual choice. Zethkari spent years trying to understand how an entire species could value abstract principles more than concrete survival. His research contributed to new diplomatic approaches that recognized fundamental differences in species psychology. Elena asked for his final thoughts about the war and its meaning. Zethkari looked directly at her with yellow eyes that still showed pain but also carried something new. Wisdom, perhaps, or acceptance of truths that had once seemed impossible to believe. He said the hegemony thought they were conquering primitives who would submit to superior force, like every other species in galactic history. Instead, They learned what it truly meant to be unconquerable. Humans had taught the galaxy that some defeats were actually victories, and some victories were actually defeats. The interview ended with Zethkari stating that he now understood humans were never primitive despite their limited technology. They possessed something more valuable than advanced weapons or faster ships. They had the courage to choose their own destiny regardless of external pressure or impossible odds. Dr. Martinez concluded her report, noting that the human galactic war had fundamentally changed how all species viewed concepts of freedom, resistance, and individual choice. Humanity's refusal to accept conquest had created new possibilities for diplomatic relations based on mutual respect rather than superior force. 15 years after the war ended, humans remained the only species ever offered equal membership in galactic civilization following armed conflict. Their example continued to influence other worlds seeking independence from traditional power structures. The galaxy had learned that true strength came from within, rather than from weapons or technology. Zethkari left the interview room walking, straighter than when he had arrived. Sharing his story seemed to have lifted some invisible weight from his shoulders. The old warrior had finally found peace with memories that had haunted him since he first encountered humans who chose death over defeat.